Hello and welcome. It's another Confessions podcast. Thank you for downloading us. Another audio array of terrible tales from the unbelievably and increasingly sinful Radio 2 listener. All seeking a little bit of forgiveness from the caring collective. This week's concise collection includes a ferocious forecourt fugitive, Dick's degrading downfall, passport purder, and an evil Easter egg evasion. Here it all comes. We're going to say this one is from Al. Thank you very much, Al, for tonight's confession. Dear Father Simon and the magnanimous masses, listening to your recent lying to the kids confession, Billy the Cornish shark wrangler, brought back painful memories of my own parental misdemeanour, one I feel I must bring before you and the collective. The story goes back only a year or so, when my two small daughters, we'll call them Sally and Daisy, were 7 and 4 respectively. We'd been spending the Saturday in our usual family fashion, getting up late, pottering around the house for a few hours, before making a riveting trip to the local supermarket. Now, whenever we visit this particular retail emporium, my wife is invariably drawn to the clothing section, where time loses all meaning. Many is the occasion when I've done 6 or 7 full laps of the store, only to find my beloved still browsing cut-price vest tops and novelty children's leggings. As it happens, we only needed to pop in for a few bits this time. However, husbands across the nation will no doubt agree that popping in rarely means just that. I know what you're talking about. Okay. For heaven's sake, how long are you going to be? On this particular Saturday, I decided to minimise the agony of wife waiting by making a trip to the on-site petrol station. Filling up the tank would cut at least 5 minutes off the interminable wait, so I dropped my wife at the store and drove around to the pumps. Sally and Daisy were quite happy to join me on this mini excursion, not least because they find supermarkets even more soul-destroying than I do, unless they're getting a toy, which they weren't. Now, this was one of those fancy pants stations with a pay-at-the-pump option. Normally, I'm strictly a kiosk man. If someone's going to take my money, I want to see the whites of their eyes first. But what the heck, I thought, why not let my hair down and try something different? So I popped in my card, the pump was activated and I filled up the tank. All finished, I replaced the nozzle, got into the car and started the engine. "Daddy!" Sally suddenly shouted. "You haven't paid!" Well, at this moment I realised that my daughters had never witnessed their parents use the pay-at-the-pump option. The mature and responsible thing would have been to explain that I had actually already paid. However, I was feeling neither mature nor responsible, but extremely mischievous. So I kept quiet, put the car in gear, slid down a few inches and began to creep slowly off the forecourt past the kiosk. "Daddy!" Sally cried. "Daddy, you have to pay!" At this point, Daisy got in on the deal and began protesting too. As soon as we passed the kiosk and approached the forecourt exit, mischief, much like the car, moved up a gear. I could have uttered a simple, "Tell you what, girls, let's try sneaking off without paying," which I'm sure you'll agree would have been bad enough. However, I decided to kick it up a notch. Hit the pedal to the pedal. No.
What?
Hit the pedal to the metal.
Yes.
And cried out with a bellowing laugh, "So long, suckers, you'll never take me alive!" While roaring out of the exit, I even affected a deafening tyre screeching noise for extra effect. To my shame, my girls did not consider our newfound fugitive status to be in the least bit exciting. Sally began bawling and wailing, pleading with me to turn back and make good. Unfortunately, this was like fuel to the fire for me. "Too late, girls, now! There's no turning back! This is our new lifestyle!"
Truth.
Since I'd enjoyed it so much the first time, I let out another, "So long, suckers, you'll never take me alive," shaking my fist in triumph out of the window. We sped around to the supermarket where my wife was waiting. She got into the car somewhat bemused by the considerable distress from the back seats. My partners in crime were rotten finks and ratted on me immediately, so I whispered to my wife that I had in fact used the pay-at-pump option. Unlike me, she did not see the funny side and quite rightly accused me of being a very bad example to our children and potentially setting them up for a life of hardened crime. She tried to explain to the girls that Daddy was just being silly, but they were having none of it. The bawling lasted a considerable amount of time, made worse by my steadfast refusal to fess up. So I asked forgiveness not from my wife, whose history of extended retail browsing was partly to blame for this episode, but from my thoroughly law-abiding daughters, who understandably feared I would get us all a long stretch in chokey. By way of defence, I should add that I was 39 at the time and would never dream of such shameless shenanigans now that I'm 40.
1 year.
Yeah. Yours, hopefully, it's Al with tonight's tale. Provoked, I think, by Mrs. Al hanging around a long time and trying on stuff.
I don't think you can blame Mrs. Al.
I think
you're leading the jury there somewhat.
I think I am.
I really feel sorry for Sally and Daisy because they knew right from wrong and their dad just confused them. And now it's going to be even worse because now that he's made this confession, they're going to find that he's been lying to them all along. So,
but he didn't steal. He didn't steal anything.
Yeah, but he did lie. So, I mean, he can't win, can he?
He was having a laugh.
He was having a laugh. I don't think that's justification. So I'm not going to forgive you, Al.
It's a hard line. Let's see what the Dean makes of this.
First, I was worried because the wife was only bemused by the distress from the back of the car, according to our correspondent. But no, deceiving the children, you can't do that. Such tender age, Sally and Daisy. And the overacting as well. I can't forgive you for that either. So, not forgiven.
Well, I was doing the acting. But
but I thought you were getting into the part.
I was.
Driven on by the words in front of you.
I quite like it. I must feel quite
I know you are. You're very sympathetic, aren't you?
Matthew?
I think Al's been watching far too many 1970s gangsters
Starsky and Hutch or something.
With this So Long Suckers, You'll Never Take Me Alive, going down for a stretch in chokey. Who says that?
Chokey?
Who says that anymore?
Everybody says it.
Apparently, yes,
chokey?
they do, in 70s gangster movies. No harm done here. I mean, obviously, the two girls are moral rectitude all the way. Good for them. A little bit too self-righteous for me, frankly.
Really?
So
6
I
or
think,
7?
well, I'm going to say Al's completely forgiven because it was all a joke anyway, and everyone got told that it was a joke. But funnily enough, no sense of humour. Turns out Al's the only one with a sense of humour, even if he has got a poor taste in movies. So I'm going to forgive.
We are herein gathered and assembled to hear the crimes of someone who we're going to be calling Craig. I don't think they're Craig, but let's call them Craig, shall we? Yes, it's another Drive Time Confession. Yours, please. confessions@bbc.co.uk, and the podcast available every Friday should you miss any. Craig says, Dear Father Simon, Sister Rebecca, the Dean of Deadliness, Brother Matthew, and assorted clergy and lay members, I wish to seek absolution on behalf of a friend. Yes, it's Dob your mate in time. We're going to call him Dick. Dick was a handsome young lad who liked to go out for the odd drink with his friends in a rather grubby mining town with a very limited choice of nightlife. These are Craig's words, obviously. One night he met a young lady who took a bit of a shine to him, and one thing led to another. Anyway, they got on very well, she giving him his own key to her house. She was quite happy for him to go out for a drink with his mates, and a warm welcome was always there at her house should he wish to visit after his night out.
Of course.
Have we got the picture? I think that's...
I think we have, very clear picture.
Generally the arrangement.
Yeah.
Anyway, one night they quarrelled and they drifted apart for some months.
Oh.
Then one night, I wouldn't be too upset.
Thank you.
One night, across the smoky, dimly lit dance floor of the local nightclub, he saw this lady waving. Since he was out with the lads, and they were just about to leave for another hostelry, he just waved back and smiled. All must have been forgiven. That's very good news. Well, after a few more sherbets, the merry bunch broke up, and having found he still possessed the key, if not to her heart, then to her house, decided that he'd be back there just to check if he still had a warm welcome. So off he went up the hill to her home. He slid the key into the lock, turned smoothly, and the door opened. Light on, it showed some redecoration had been undertaken in the living room and some new furniture as well. Well, our hero Dick proceeded to the kitchen as he was feeling a touch peckish. The fridge was also new. Anyway, upon opening the door, found it to be much better stocked than it had been hitherto. A nice block of cheese tempted him, washed down with a swig of milk. History is unclear as to whether there was any...
What?
It's
sounds like whole thing.
It's
you can do this. Come on.
Well, it's been changed here, but it's
right.
Well, you know when you drink something and then bits come back into the.
No, we don't know. How would we know that?
It's that word.
Okay.
Anyway, Dick, having had his fill of the cheese and milk, and quenched his thirst, and headed upstairs. All this fluid led to a visit to the loo, and then
Full use of facilities.
Yes. Anyway, and then off to the bedroom. As a surprise, Dick decided that he should kick the door open. And
it's backwash, isn't it? By the way?
backwash.
Yeah.
Backwash is exactly the thing.
Very good.
Sorry.
You've been beavering. Yeah, very good. Good work.
Very good.
That's when you come in with backwash.
Yes.
Anyway.
Leave it a bit. Yes.
Dick
Why the association? I've no idea.
After a while, brains slow down. And the word that you
backwash!
need...
Oh,
Yes, precisely that point.
I'm surprised it arrived that early, to be honest. Anyway,
Yes.
Dick decided he should kick the door open and sing "And I Will Always Love You" by Whitney Houston at the top of his voice. Oh, no. And I should tell you, Dick sings with his eyes shut. When he opened his eyes again, as you might have guessed, he was rather surprised to find not his beloved in her negligee, but a rather irate-looking gentleman with a beard, traditional meaning. After crossing 2 roads and
Very good.
and running through a park, Dick concluded that the pursuit from the bearded man had finally ceased, and he headed for home. Some days later, he met his beloved in the pub. "Why didn't you tell me you'd got a new bloke?" "I haven't," she said. "I was just trying to tell you the other night that I've moved house.
Oh, no.
I even signed a document that I'd handed back all the keys, but I'd forgotten I'd given you a key. And have you seen page 7 of the local paper?" There on page 7, an account of a householder being awoken by a drunken intruder who plundered the fridge, disturbed the sleep of the occupant, and shown a remarkable turn of speed. A full and pretty accurate description of the person whom the local constabulary wished to help them with their inquiries was then given. Well, our Dick was a law-abiding type and decided that he'd have to visit the cop shop and try to explain what had happened and beg them not to send him to prison. Which is obviously not down to the police, that's down to the courts. Yeah. Our trembling hero told the desk sergeant why he was there and was led to an interview room where a detective type listened to his sorry tale. It seems that this detective required a second opinion and summoned another, telling him through tears of laughter to come and listen to this, and made Dick retell the story. This detective also seemed to require further opinion, as did the others who were summoned. After narrating his tale 8 times, the officers of the law concluded that no crime worthy of a stretch with Mr. Big in Chokey had been committed, and he was free to go. I just added in Chokey.
Twice in a week.
I added in Chokey just for you.
All right.
Okay. So, dear Father Simon, I throw Dick upon your tender mercies for absolution from his heinous crimes, lust, gluttony, and wasting police time. But, you see, when he got to that police bit, I thought, well, we're not going to be able to use it. But the fact that he actually went to the police station and they had a good old laugh about it, let's see whether Sister Rebecca has indeed laughed.
Well, first of all, I think the bearded man should have changed the locks when he moved in. That would have been the sensible thing to do.
Yes.
I do think that Dick did a good thing by going to the police, and the police were kind of mean by making him tell everyone the story. But I think the fact that he'd split up from his girlfriend and but still thought he'd be able to go back to her house, even though he'd split up with her, for a warm welcome was a bit annoying of him. So for that, I am not going to forgive you, Dick.
OK, let's...
Are you not at all?
Come on, Dean. Well, you either do or you don't.
I think I might really. He sort of owned up and said everything that he should have done. I agree with you, though, that whenever you move house, always change the locks almost immediately, as soon as you can. Don't leave it as long as...
Well, I guess they thought, you know...
as long as there's enough time for backwash. I mean, it's just not on, is it?
All the keys had been handed back.
And why Craig is telling everybody about this, I have no idea, to be honest. So I forgive Dick.
What happened was that backwash had been changed to washing up, which is clearly not quite the same.
No, but it's on the right lines, to be fair.
Anyway, what do we have here from Brother Matt?
Who are these people who are giving out keys to people that they are romantically involved in but don't live with? Nobody else gets keys to my house.
Have you never done that?
Other than people that I live with. What are you doing giving your keys out? Oh. It's a bizarre set of circumstances. Yes. And for that, I am actually going to forgive, because
it's her fault.
It's probably her fault. I'm going to say it's her fault. She should have told him. And what's she doing, handing out keys?
She tried to tell him.
How bizarre is that? No, I'm definitely going to forgive.
Dear Simon and the Righteous Few. Who's this one? It's from Andrew, by the way. Thank you, Andrew. I have recently celebrated my 6th anniversary with my present employers, and now would seem like a good time to confess regret from my 2nd day in the job. So I seek atonement from you and your esteemed panel. I had accompanied on my 2nd day my director, Peter, to Glasgow on a day trip to visit a number of retail locations, whereupon we were to fly back to London and in the early evening attend an office social. Keen to impress, I was sharp-suited and fully prepared, having undertaken research on a city I had little knowledge of. The day was a success as we attended various meetings and experienced the splendour of the Victorian architecture of Buchanan Street and Exchange Square. I had started to lay the foundations of a good relationship with Peter and hoped that he would be impressed with my knowledge, professional manner, and attention to detail. As we hit the late afternoon traffic on our way out of town, our attention turned to our watches as the flight departure time started to edge closer. We made the airport with 30 minutes or so to spare and dashed to the check-in desk and onwards through security, having to take part in the usual striptease as we passed through the metal detector, taking off jackets and watches and belts and cufflinks together with shoes and then placing them in the box to go through the scanner. Our plane was called with the boarding gate mad dash down to the far end of the terminal. Peter had already gone through the metal detector and was waiting for me anxiously, keen to get a move on. In a state of some undress, I grabbed my possessions together and staggered down to the boarding gate, redressing as I went, and arrived at the boarding gate where I began to recover my composure and passed the attendant my passport and boarding pass and looked to follow the boss down the bridge and onto the plane. However, before I stepped forward, the attendant checked my passport and with a look of surprise and bewilderment said something like, and if you'll excuse me, I won't do the Glaswegian flight attendant voice, "Hey laddie, is there something you're not telling me?" Were the words. She handed back the passport and stopped me from moving forwards. I looked down at my passport and found to my horror that the picture portrayed a brunette lady with glasses, and for the purposes of this tale we're going to call her Morag. I started to feel small beads of sweat rolling down my forehead as the final call for our flight was made, and my new boss of 2 days was wondering what on earth was going on. I wondered how this could have happened. And then suddenly Morag's face seemed rather familiar. She'd been in front of me when we passed through security, disrobing, and I suddenly realised that we must have accidentally picked up the wrong passports as we gathered our possessions following the Striptease Act. I have to say she had fine shoulders. Anyway, says Andrew, after a quick check through the airport's manifest, Morag, it transpired, had been in a rush too and had missed her flight to Amsterdam. As my flight was domestic, I was able to board the flight using my photo driving licence, although it says here photo diving licence, which I think is something else altogether, as I only needed to provide photographic identification. I gave the attendant my home address and she kindly agreed to forward my passport on once the exchange of passports with Morag had taken place. I was then the last passenger on the plane and had the indignity of suffering the usual rueful looks and tutting from my fellow passengers before taking my seat, and I recanted my tale to Peter, who had given up waiting for me at the gate and got onto the plane without me. I explained that it was Morag who had taken the lead role to perpetrate this grave error by grabbing my passport first, and he rolled his eyes at the thought of this ridiculous gaffe. Anyway, during the short flight, I did start to get a little bit fidgety and uncomfortable. Do you know, this airline seat does seem a little bit lumpier than normal? So I was rummaging around, and I felt something in my back trouser pocket. It was an offending object, and I was digging around into my derriere only to find, as you might have realised, it was my passport. I had quickly realised that in my haste to get to the plane, I had picked up the passport laid out onto the seat next to me as I was putting my shoes back on in security, leaving Morag presumably in a total tears, as she no doubt was in a panic trying to find hers and retrace her steps aimlessly. Luckily for me, Peter was in deep concentration reviewing some work papers or something and didn't catch sight of my gaffe, which would have proved even a huge cause of embarrassment. And he never knew, in fact doesn't know, until this day. So I therefore have to seek forgiveness not from my boss, who I have concealed the real story from for 6 years, but obviously from Morag, who missed her flight and hoped that the purpose of her visit to Amsterdam was for a boring business trip and not a raucous city break with the girls. Anyway, yours in anticipation, Andrew. Who knows what happened, but she clearly missed her flight. She might have missed a fabulous and important business meeting, and all because he had 2 passports, including Morag's.
So she missed her flight because he had her passport. Yes. Is that clear? Right, well, that is pretty bad, because I thought she missed her flight anyway because she was late. In effect, it made little difference, the fact that he had both passports or that they swapped passports. I mean, it was an honest mistake, wasn't it? It's not like he did something naughty.
Photo ID?
I don't know about that. I don't know.
Not anymore, you're not.
Not anymore, thank you very much indeed.
Well, no, but this was an internal flight, though. It wasn't outside
even
Schengen or whatever it is.
The one to Amsterdam.
I'm sure people would tell us, oh, the one to Amsterdam, yeah, of course. But anyway, I think it was an honest mistake. As I said, he didn't do it on purpose, and I can completely understand why he didn't tell his boss, because it would have been terribly embarrassing, and he wouldn't have gained anything anyway. So I'm going to forgive you, Andrew.
Well, it's nice to know that Morag had fine shoulders.
Yes.
What do you think?
Yes, it is. That's throwing me. I'm always paranoid going through those things because I always feel guilty anyway. But I'm always paranoid about losing my passport.
Why do you feel guilty?
Because everyone does. Everyone going through those port security always feels guilty. But I always have my boarding pass and my passport in my teeth as I go through, just so that I don't look. Yeah,
Like that.
That sounds very good impression of a dog with a bone.
Thank
Dog,
you.
yeah. So I always have them in my teeth, so there's no way I can lose them.
You go on holiday with your family, you just have them all.
Yes.
Oh, my goodness me. Look out, it's the Williams family.
And then I get stopped.
What if you have to talk to the security?
Well, then I'll take it out. I'm not.
Okay.
I put them there so I know where they are. That's all. That's not weird. Everyone does
What
that.
do you put it in your hand?
No, because then I'll put that down, you see.
Okay.
Whereas if I've got them in my teeth, then I can't.
Yeah,
exactly. And if Morag had done that, she'd be flying to Amsterdam.
It's her
Looks
fault.
like I'm the one that gets the last laugh, Morag. I'm not looking weird. You're not going to Amsterdam. Ah ha ha. So I don't forgive. Yes, I do forgive. Yes, I forgive because she's the one that.
It's her
she
fault.
missed out. Yeah. So I forgive. Yeah.
Glad we got there. Jill has sent in tonight's confession. Jill, thank you very much indeed. It's called Easter Charade for reasons that will become obvious. Dear Simon and the Forgiving Folk, as Easter looms and the supermarkets have their seasonal offers stacked high, I'm once again reminded of my act of deception from nearly 20 years ago. Well, in actual fact, I suppose I'm reminded each year from about the 2nd of January, which is when the first themed chocolate treats begin to creep onto the shelves. One day during the school holidays, I was admiring the 3 small Easter eggs that I'd received from members of my family. I like to look at the packaging, read about the treats I'd find inside, and generally arrange and rearrange them to prolong the enjoyment of the rare treat of having a chocolate supply that was allowed to be kept in my bedroom. One of the boxes was from my parents, and it housed a Disney-themed egg. I loved it because 101 Dalmatians was my favourite film of all time. However, on closer inspection of the box, I discovered that the chocolate inside was white, my least favourite. One of my 3 precious eggs was suddenly deemed almost inedible. I didn't want to appear ungrateful to my parents, and refusing the gift wasn't an option, so I thought I'd give the white chocolate a try. Who knows, maybe my taste buds had matured since my last taste. Well, carefully I opened the box, removed the wrapped delicate shell and peeled back the foil to unveil the top of the egg. I took a nibble, took a bite, took a chunk. Well, it appeared that my 10-year-old palate had still not yet acquired a liking for the disgusting white chocolate. Anyway, then a thought occurred to me, and I have to say it was a deceitful one, and I'm rather ashamed of it. Carefully folding back the foil and returning the egg to the box, I took it downstairs to where my mum was in the kitchen. "I think I'm going to open my Dalmatian egg first, Mum," I announced enthusiastically as I walked into the room. "OK, just make sure you don't eat too much. Lunch will be ready soon," she replied, the way mums always do. And then began my Oscar-winning performance, says Jill. I made a point of loudly opening the box and reopening the foil. "Mum, someone's taken a bite out of my egg," I exclaimed, in a style that wasn't unlike Baby Bear from the Goldilocks story. What would that be like? "Mum, someone's taken a bite out of my egg."
That sounds like a man.
Well,
Okay.
yeah.
"Mum,
Not a bear.
It's a baby bear. The baby
Do it
male.
like a bear.
Mum, someone's taken a bite out of my egg." Is that how
Doesn't
bears
sound
talk?
like a bear.
That's kind of frightening, isn't it?
Obviously, my mum was horrified, inspected the egg and resolved to return it to the shops to make a big complaint. I will confide at this point that I hadn't actually thought through this scenario fully, and with no real aim, I wasn't entirely sure what I'd thought the outcome would be. I suppose I was playing it by ear from this point on. So on our next trip back into town, Mum and I returned to the shop that had sold me the offending item, went straight back to the customer service desk. I stood by silently whilst my mother explained politely but firmly that it wasn't acceptable to sell a product that had clearly been tampered with, and how disappointed her daughter had been to discover a tried and rejected item where someone had actually taken a bite out of it. What is the world coming to? Anyway, my Oscar-winning performance continued as I donned my sad face right on cue. The shop employee was, of course, horrified that such a thing had happened and immediately took me over to the remaining Easter egg stock and allowed me to choose from any 3 large ones that I desired as a replacement. I'm giving back one white one that I didn't want, and I can choose 3 large ones that I do want. Of course, I was overjoyed, and when I returned home, added my milk chocolate spoils to my remaining eggs. I was set for months. And to this day, says Jill, my mum has no idea that it was me who left the teeth marks in the chocolate, and how she became unwittingly an accomplice in my deceit. Because deceit, let me tell you, is precisely what this was. However, there are high street implications in the story. Jill says, I need forgiveness from my mum, who has always been an excellent refund claimant and has never once lied or ever been fraudulent when returning an item or making a legitimate complaint. And to the employee of the shop, who was so kind and apologetic in making up for their wrongdoing. At this point, I will also admit that said shop...
Oh, no. Oh, I know what's coming.
Went bust.
Woolies.
It was Woolworths. Closed all its high street stores, and I do feel the guilt that maybe my lie all those years ago contributed. Maybe it was the first flake in the snowballing loss of profits that led to Woolies' demise. Yours sincerely, grovellingly, it's Jill. Well, yeah. Well, I mean, it's an interesting thing, and obviously, don't try this at home. You have to just go with the eggs that you're given, and if you don't like it, then melt it down and give it to your baby brother or something like that. What do you think,
I can't understand Jill not liking white chocolate. I love it.
No, it's horrible.
Really?
No,
it's got sugar in it.
It's
I
sweet
mean, what
and
10-year-old
nasty.
doesn't like sweet stuff?
Well, clearly Jill.
Jill. Jill didn't mean to get the shop involved, I'll give her that, but it did happen, and she did put her mother in quite an awkward situation. I don't think it's her fault that Woolies closed, but I think actually that it was quite a sort of cunning plan, not in a good way.
She hadn't thought it through, though.
She hadn't thought it through, but I think even sort of pretending to her mother that it had happened was a bit going a bit too far. So actually, I'm not going to forgive.
Oh, you're such a hard person on this one. The novice is in.
Yeah. So it wasn't the city analysts were all wrong. It was Jill, the first flake of a diminishing law of confectionery turn. She brought Woolies down. She didn't woman up. She didn't confess to her mum. She had masses of time. She stole 3 eggs that weren't available to her. Well, a choice of 3 eggs. No, she took them all, didn't she?
Yeah, she took 3.
You seething swine. Jill, definitely not
That's
forgiven.
very, very harsh.
Wow. I say.
Sorry, Jill, but no.
Well, yes, but frankly, if it was 3 Easter eggs that brought the shop down, they're already in trouble.
Very good.
I am, however...
Are you Hugh Pym, really?
I very much so, yeah. I am going to forgive only because I can't stand white chocolate either. What's the point in white chocolate? You may as well just have normal chocolate. There's no point in white chocolate. You have milk chocolate, then you have dark chocolate, and then very far down the scale you have white chocolate. No one likes white chocolate.
The Milky Bar Kid does.
Apart it appears Rebecca. Okay.
Bars are on me.
That's it. Well, now that's a good impersonation.
Again?
And in fact, no. Don't go there, Nige. Yeah.
That was my bear voice, also doubling up as the Milky Bar Kid voice.
Yeah,
is that all right?
Milky Bar Kid, that's good.
Strong and tough. And only the best is good enough. The meat.
You
This
weren't,
is another
were you,
voice
by
to
the
add to
time?
the camp, the Cornish and the Cockney.
You know, there are lots of different people who played the Milky Bar Kid over the years.
Really?
We're across the desk from one of them.
Well, they were this week's confessions. Pretty good. Let us know your own dodgy, shadowy secret, please. Inspired by one of those, maybe who can say? Here's the email. confessions@bbc.co.uk. The Weekly Mayo, available to download. Thank you very much.